Yes, we should.
We'll get going. Good morning, everyone. We are up to 109 screens on, so that's amazing. My name is Julia Loeb, and Ellen Kaner-Bresnick and I are the co-chairs of the Education Committee for Women's League. I want to welcome all of you to our challah baking workshop this morning, where you'll be able to convert, almost by magic or kitchen chemistry, the most basic raw ingredients, flour, sugar, yeast, eggs, and oil, and a little bit of salt into these beautiful braided challah for your Shabbat table. Along the way, you're going to be able to learn about the Mitzvah related to challah. You'll hear some personal experiences about the power of baking and the symbolism of the ingredients. And you'll have a chance to hear about other upcoming Women's League education programs. So just a few housekeeping notes for the day. There are going to be 3 sessions total. We're in session 1 right now. We're going to break around noon for Psalms, so don't worry, you can still have your Psalms study and be able to say Kaddish today. The second session will start about 12:45 Eastern Time, and the third session will start at 2 o'clock Eastern Time. We're going to have probably over 200 people on this call, so you are all muted on Zoom and won't be able to unmute and ask questions. So if you have a question, please type it into the chat, which will be moderated. We'll make sure to get all the questions answered and pass them along to Edna at the appropriate time. When you're typing in the chat, please type it out to everyone. Don't send your questions directly to Edna, because she will not be reading the chat to see what you're typing. So type it out to everyone. And I just want to thank Grace Schessler and Karen Seltzer. They're the co-chairs of Women's League's Programming Committee, and they're going to help us moderate it today. At the top of the chat, if you scroll up, we've posted a link to the packet that you all should have received by email in case you don't have the recipe right in front of you. And most importantly, enjoy the day. If you make a mistake, the challah will still taste delicious. You'll have a chance to try again, and you will have learned something along the way. Now I'd like to introduce Debbie Kaner-Goldich, International President of Women's League for Conservative Judaism.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you very much, and welcome and good morning to everyone. I want to say thank you very much to Julia and to Ellen, and also to Grace and Karen for helping out, but for Julia and Ellen for creating such a wonderful opportunity for our women. In a few minutes, you'll meet Rabbi Ellen Wollensfield, who is Women's League's Executive Director. And with Rabbi and Ellen and Julia, we've created some amazing educational programs for all of our women. We're so happy that you're here today. And I know that many of you may have already participated in a challah bake to learn to bake challah. But what makes this day a little bit unique and a lot different is that you will learn why, as Jewish women, we bake challah. And so Rabbi and I already had a conversation this morning, and I told her that I was excited because when I bake challah and I knead challah, as I'm kneading the dough, I can feel the power of my ancestors before me for thousands of years who have kneaded dough to make challah for Friday night dinner. So I want all of you to take that memory of me, my ancestors, and think about your own ancestors and what it means to them and to you to make challah today as a Jewish woman. And so we thank you for being with us, and I'm going to turn it back to, I think, Julia, and have a wonderful day.
Actually, to Ellen.
To Ellen.
It's fine. It's fine. Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're really glad to have you with us. And just to continue a little bit with what Debbie was saying, we did enclose in the packet this particular sheet, and I hope you will read it at some point, the symbolism of challah, but looking at the individual ingredients and what they represent and what they can suggest to you. And it's very senses related. A lot of the things that Debbie was talking about. So we put that in the packet. We also put in a story by Lois Silverman of when she was baking challah for the first time. And, you know, if you have these moments where you have baked challah or you remember attempting to bake challah, please feel free to write it down, send it to one of us. We will post our emails on here. So by all means, send it to us. We're keeping track of a lot of these stories and experiences that our women have had, either in the past or in the present. And we hope to publish them and use them in some way. So I'm inviting you and encouraging you to do that as well. It is now my great pleasure to reintroduce Rabbi Ellen Wolens-Fields. She'll be teaching us later. Rabbi, wave again to everybody who's coming on. She'll be teaching us later as we knead the dough, and we'll be learning what we need to know. That was my big joke for the day. What we need to know, you know, as we are baking challah, and, you know, really to understand everything, emotionally, spiritually, religiously, everything that goes into this. All right, so now my other great pleasure is to introduce Edna Schrank, who is our, our professor, our educator, our leader for the day on this. And Edna's doing us a really huge favor. I think she got tired of getting everybody's questions about, Edna, please teach us and help us to do this. Many of us know how to do challahs and bake challahs. You can see, do challahs. Okay, this is not my thing, but I will be better at the end of the day. At any rate, you know, Edna has really generously offered her time. And so thank you in advance, Edna. And if you know Edna, you'll know that she's someone who can be called upon to get a job done. She comes from a heritage of leadership in Jewish organizations and is fiercely loyal to the cause. She's been sisterhood president of 2 sisterhoods. Her current sisterhood is Congregation Beth Shalom in Northbrook, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago, where she's held many positions prior to being president, and she continues to be active on the board. She was a member of the Synagogue Board of Trustees and is on the Ritual Committee now and the Youth Committee, where she has the honor, I love this, where she has the honor of being a judge in the chili cook-off for many years. So one of Edna's next classes will be on making chili. Through her participation at Congregation Beth Shalom and Women's League, she now reads Torah, and another talent she has, she can do Hagbah. So, you know, that all those years of kneading that dough, she's got strong arms. She served as Central Great Lakes Region's Torah Fund Vice President and President of the region. She now serves as a Women's League International Vice President and is a member of our Education Committee. She continues to serve as the Torah Fund Legacy Society Chair. And in her other life, she's married to Mike, a retired pharmacist, has a son who is married, Seth, who is married to Lonnie, and a daughter, Francie, who's married to David Dundor. Seth and Lonnie are the immensely proud parents of Mira and Reuben, and Francie and David are the immensely proud parents of Lila. And of course, that makes Edna and Mike exceptionally proud grandparents. So Edna, you're on, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you. Just a slight note about the Hagbah part. I don't know if you could see, but I am not the tallest person in the world. And the funniest thing is when I go up to the bima, and who's doing Galila is a 6-foot-tall man. And we switch places very quickly, and you hear the, oh, who's doing Hagbah? So I know how to do it, and we've had no mishaps, so we're going to keep it that way. So good morning. Thank you for joining us today. Baking challah and baking is one of my favorite things, and it's not just putting the ingredients together, it's what it means after the product is done. So you also received the stay-at-home orders in your packet, but I'm going to read it to you because this kind of put a lot of things together for me. I just read an article that King Arthur Flour Company has seen a surge in home baking orders. You cannot find all-purpose flour, bread flour, or yeast on the grocery shelves. Why? Why? Because we are at home. With stay-at-home orders all throughout the United States and Canada, we are finding that we have time to try recipes, and without being able to run to the grocery store multiple times a day, supplies are low or non-existent. Baking has become one of the positive sides of this pandemic, the COVID-15 pounds notwithstanding. Not only does baking satisfy the need to have something delicious in our home, but is one thing that we can have some control over. Notice I said some. If you have ever baked bread, you will know that it does not always go your way. The temperature, humidity, and ingredients play with each other differently each time. But what you end up with is very satisfying. Cookies are far more forgiving than bread, and it seems that those misshapen, broken pieces taste better than the picture-perfect ones. But we bake and we bake. Baking Facebook groups are exploding in membership. Challah baking for dummies, sourdough baking bread, baking ourselves crazy, kosher recipe exchange, the kosher baker, etc. People are posting their successes and almost successes for comments, praise, or just plain help. I know because I'm a frequent poster. But what is really about baking that gives us such pleasure? It is our creative side coming out. How many times have you heard someone say, after eating a home-baked good, that does not taste like the bakery. It's so much better. We often joke as bakers that we add a secret ingredient in our recipe, and that ingredient is love. So after I bake, it gives me tremendous pleasure to give my baked goods away. I know that when that lucky person takes a taste, they will be thinking of the baker. In this time of social distancing, it gives me great joy to feel the love any way I can get it. Our stay-at-home time has created new communities of similar activities and brand new ones. It will be interesting to see if these continue after we are back in somewhat of normalcy. I, for one, will be happy to not only feel the love for sharing my baking, but getting a real hug for it. So I do a lot of these classes now because that's what we do. And I was on a class that the person running it was talking about a book called Hasidic Tales of the Holocaust by Yafa Elech. And from a story to marry a baker, there is this quote: "There is nothing more reassuring in the world than a basket of freshly baked bread on the table in front of you." It's kind of odd that it came out of a book about the Holocaust, but she continued and said, and I think we all know this, but it's something to bring out, that piece of bread that was given to the people that were in the camps was an unbelievable commodity. And they have proven facts that people would give their jewelry away just to get a slice of bread. So bread isn't just yeast and flour and water. There's a lot behind it. And bread baking has been going on for centuries. Unlike our electric ovens and gas ovens, people were baking bread over open fires, in stone ovens. It just keeps going on and on. And of course, our own Passover story, there wasn't enough time for the dough to rise, so we have matzah. So bread is really an important part of our community. And just a little note, when you start looking at the origins of the words for food, salt, which is a very important part of baking bread, which I found out the hard way when I left it out of a recipe. It does not work without salt. Is that salt, many centuries ago, was used to pay the soldiers. And the word salary comes from salt. So think of that when you throw the salt in a recipe, how that was so important to somebody in war or defending their country, that was the way they were feeding their families. So, yes.
I just want to interrupt a minute. In case people didn't see it in the chat, I just want everyone to know that this is being recorded and that it will be available after this on the members only section of the Women's League website. And as well, that's where the packet is with the recipe. And if you're looking for the recipe, we posted a link to it at the very top of the chat. So you just need to scroll up to the top to get that information.
Person was on the chat. Then they didn't log in.
Okay,
It's not
thank
their
you. Okay, so how did I get to this point? Well, I think back of when I was a child, and my grandmother was an unbelievable baker. But of course, as a child, in modern times when silver cup bread was my favorite bread, and it came sliced and it was white bread and it was gushy and it came in a plastic bag. And I'd walk into my grandmother's house and she just took the loaf out of the oven and said, "Do you want some?" And I'd go, "Are you kidding? I don't want to eat that." Silly me. I was going through some old recipes and I found her recipe. So one day I'm going to make it. So the challah really started, I think I had done it before, but about 14 years ago, a friend and I went to a local cooking store. They were hosting Rosh Hashanah cooking. So we figured, why not? If we don't learn anything, it's a fun evening out. And the woman doing the class did this challah, and it was fabulous. I've done some changes. This was like the original part of the recipe. And of course we said, "How did you make this bread?" Because she didn't mix it in front of us. She says, "I use a bread machine." And we both looked at each other and said, "There isn't a chance I'm getting another appliance in my kitchen. But you can use a KitchenAid or you can use a food processor." I will say honestly, I'm a bread machine person. We're doing it by hand today because not everybody has one. But I went home, and for the next Shabbat, I tried doing it in food processor. I have a small one. That was not a good move. And then I tried the KitchenAid, and I had to stand there and watch it. I have my KitchenAid on a shelf. I said, "This isn't going to work." So I happened to be in Target, and at the end cap are all the sale items. They had a bread machine for like $30, $40. I said, okay, well, that was it. So I have been making bread, challah for sure, in the bread machine all these years. So I'm going to give you my viewpoint on the measuring versus the weighing, because I did have some questions on this. Weighing ingredients, especially for bread, because bread is really a scientific experiment, is the gold standard. You can't take a cup of flour, or I can't take a cup of flour and consistently get the same weight every time. It took me until a couple of months ago to realize that I was not measuring my flour right. You have to put it in the cup and shake it like you're sifting it. I was just taking it and dumping it. Okay, well, I can't get it, so all the recipes that I try to use are by weight. And everything in this recipe is by weight, even the liquid, even the salt, even the yeast. It also takes into effect the humidity. It's going to be very humid today in Chicago, and that would change the whole makeup of this dough if I didn't weigh it. The other part about using a scale is we'll get into dividing the dough up into smaller loaves if that's what you want. Each loaf, when it's baked at the same time, has to be the same weight. Because imagine if you had a 1.5 pound piece of dough and a 3/4 pound piece of dough, they're not going to bake at the same time. So the scale is crucial all the way through this process. And one other thing about the scale, and this is my big tip for you, because they're all on batteries, always have an extra battery at your disposal, because there's nothing worse than weighing something and it goes out. You can't run out to get a new battery. So if that's the only thing you get out of this, it's worth it. All right. Generations. My granddaughter at 4 can braid challah like you would not believe. She was over and we baked 4 small loaves. And the funniest thing was when she was doing it, I took a video and she didn't know that I wanted her to speak. And she's going, you put this guy over here and this guy over here and this guy over here and this guy over here. And I want to tell you, when she was done, I was blown away. So if 4-year-old can do it, we can all do it. And then my 2-year-old grandson, who can't do that yet, but he loves books like this. Read these books to your grandchildren. This book is terrific because it's very much like Haggadah. It keeps adding the things and it's in a sing-songy kind of thing. This is PJ Library came out with this, but I didn't get it from PJ Library. I just ordered it. So involve them. All right, recipe. We're gonna do this by hand. I have a mixing bowl and I'm gonna tip the camera and I have my scale. The bowl goes on the scale. Can you all see? Okay, the bowl goes on the scale. I hit, my scale is on. I'm zeroing out to ounces. The difference between ounces and grams is far more precise, and a grain or two will push it over to the next gram. I like working ounces, but the recipe also has the grams, so you'd be fine either way. I'm gonna put these in the order I would in a bread machine. It doesn't matter, food processor or a mixer or by hand. It only matters when you're using a bread machine. You must put in the liquid first. So we're gonna do it as pretending that's the way it is. Okay, well, that's a good way to do it. Okay. I've got 2 eggs. Now, I don't do the eggs by weight, but I do look at it because if it's really off from the 4 ounces, I know that I have a little margin to put a little more water in it if I don't measure it completely right. All right, the water is, let me just put this on, is right from my tap. And I have it on the hottest that it is. It's about 100 degrees. Okay, so now I'm gonna zero out the scale again. And I'm gonna put, and I always pour it in on the side of the bowl because I don't want to take a chance that I'm gonna scramble the eggs. And 10 ounces by weight is not 10 ounces by measure. Okay. All right. Vegetable oil. I use canola oil. I put it in one of these squeeze bottles. It's much easier for me to handle than a great big container. And that's 4 ounces. Okay, sugar is 4 ounces. Make sure you zero out your scale every time you add something. Okay. All right. Yeast. Now, the yeast in a package is 1/4 ounce. So you need 3 of the little packages. I have a special yeast spoon, and it's supposed to be 1 envelope at 2 1/4 teaspoons, which means I should be using 3 of these. I do not use 3 of them. That's why I always go by weight. Okay. Now the salt, as I said before, I learned the hard way that you have to have salt in a yeast bread. I'm not sure why, but the bread came out, looked great in the beginning as it cooled, and I have to say it was a gluten-free loaf, so that does make a difference. And it got smaller and smaller, and I picked it up. It was like a hockey puck. I knew something was wrong, so when I made it again, I realized when I was doing the ingredients that I had left the salt out. I kept the bad ones just to see, and when I was done with the good recipe, the weight on them was totally different and the same ingredients were in there. So you absolutely have to use salt. And this is another tip on salt. I use diamond salt. Diamond salt is a much finer salt crystals. But the thing about diamond salt is you have to use double the amount. Recipe books will tell you if they use it. Otherwise, just use, you can use sea salt, you can use kosher salt, whatever salt you like. The coarser the grain, it might be harder for it to dissolve. So instead of 3/8 of an ounce, I put 5 to 6/8. Okay. All right, now for the flour. So the reason why you use bread flour is bread flour has higher protein than all-purpose flour, and protein is what makes the gluten, which is why somebody that has celiacs can't process the protein in it. So you certainly, if you don't have bread flour, you can certainly try it with all-purpose. It won't be as when you tear it apart, you get the strings of the gluten. You won't get that so much when you do it with all-purpose flour, but it's still good. I do have recipes for challah with all-purpose flour. So just this is the one that I started making. Okay, so now we need, I do 13 ounces of bread flour and 13 ounces of whole wheat flour. You don't want to use whole wheat flour, don't use it. Do not make this whole thing with all whole wheat flour. I did that once also and used it as a doorstop. So I'm saving you. And if you noticed in the yeast, because it's instant yeast, you don't need to proof it first. I keep my yeast and my specialty flours, not the bread and not the whole wheat, in the freezer. And I have yet to have yeast go bad. But then again, now I'm using it so much. And if you notice in the recipe, it calls for gold yeast if you're doing raisins. Gold yeast is used for sweeter breads and coffee cakes, because when you put too much sugar and sweet add-ins to your dough, it stops the yeast from working as well. But don't worry about it, that not too many places you can find that. You have to order it. I order everything from King Arthur. All right, so I have a little too much in here, so I'm just gonna take it out. All right. Actually, the way I'm putting it in here is the way you're supposed to measure in a measuring cup. I like doing it in a mound, because if I wind up having too much, it's really easy to take a little bit off without getting some of the other ingredients in. Perfect.
Edna,
Yes.
we're getting a lot of questions on ingredients.
Okay.
I
This is
did
a
want to
good
interrupt
time.
while you were measuring them in, but maybe you can go back through each one, the order. A lot of people missed the order.
Sure.
They went in and a lot of people are kind of stuck on the yeast and the salt. Why
Okay.
you need more than 3/8 of an ounce, how you weigh that when you tear out your scale.
Okay. All right. So you
And
want to
then
give me
can
a
you
specific
just talk
question?
about the gluten-free challah?
Well, okay. Well, maybe one day we'll do a gluten-free class because that's a whole other ball game. This is not a recipe where you could just take gluten-free flour and substitute it. The recipe that we use is very specific as a gluten-free recipe. And if you think this is a science experiment, that one's even more of a science experiment. But it comes out perfect. My daughter-in-law is the one I bake it for. She found the recipe. And I have tried many different recipes. I will not try any others because this is the one that works.
So
All right,
if
I'm
you can just-
mixing the flour. Let me just say this one thing. I'm using like a bread whisk only because I have it. You can certainly use a spatula. Okay, go ahead, Julia.
So if you can just go through the order that you're putting the ingredients again. And there were a couple of things. One is, if your eggs aren't 4 ounces, when you weigh them, do you have to add extra water?
No, I never do, but I know like these two, it was 3 3/4 ounces. If I would have put a little too much water in and it was 10 1/4 ounces, I would be okay. But I never make it up. I have never done that.
And can you repeat what you said about the types of the salt? Do you need more than
The
the
only
11
one you
grams if
need,
you're using a different type of salt?
the only one you have to double is diamond flour. Now let me show you the package. I mean salt, not flour. It's diamond crystal salt, and it is a very fine salt crystal. And this is really what the professional chefs use. You can't get it all over. Sometimes you have to order it. We have a spice shop close by, so I get it from them. I can't get it in the grocery stores, and I think it's odd because that's what the chefs use. So, but if I run out of it, I'll go back to kosher salt, Morton's kosher salt, and then do it exactly what the directions say.
Before you take that out, I think people are kind of behind.
Okay.
They're not up to there. So they want to know, they want to be able to see on the scale how you tear it out.
Oh, sure, absolutely. Okay. So I don't know if you could see this. So I'm going to turn it on. And see my thing says 0 and on. And then the other side, it's ounces and grams. So I'm going to stick my finger on here. Okay, so it's that. Now I want to get it back to 0. It's hard doing it upside down. I think it's because I'm holding it up. But you do that each time. You just 0 it out. And if you turn it off, that's okay too. Just turn it on and you'll hit 0. Did that help?
We'll see. A lot of people are saying that their dough is very sticky, or more like
It
a
is.
batter than a dough.
No, it shouldn't be. So this is my dough. And I'm going to put it on here to knead. You can knead it in a bowl. This bowl is too small for that.
Can you substitute honey for the sugar?
You can. I have tried it. I sell my challah, and I had a customer that wanted me to try that. And this recipe, she said, let's go back to the sugar. So you can definitely do that. It is a very common substitution, but I don't use it.
And the recipe had cinnamon in it.
That's only if you want. I use that only when I'm using it with raisins, because that makes it sweeter. I like more of a savory challah. My grandkids like the cinnamon raisin.
And what do you do if it's too sticky or too loose?
Well, you will see. We're going to put a little more flour on it.
Okay.
Now, a tip also, if you're using a bread machine and you've never used one before, in my bread machine, I have a Cuisinart. I have to watch it the first couple minutes because it like has legs and the flour and the eggs come up to the top. And if I don't scrape the pail, it's going to stay like that. So just be mindful when you use a bread machine to check it the first couple minutes. Okay, so we're gonna, I've got my flour here. All right, and I'm gonna, and like I said, this is a little awkward for me because I never knead by hand. So we're kind of doing this together. So the way you knead is you pull it and use the heel of your hand. Don't use your fingers. And just keep going around the dough.
So you're only doubling the salt if you're using
That's all.
that diamond crystal salt.
That's it. You don't double it any other time. You're going to get very salty bread.
And is
I'm
there a
not
way
sure
to
why it is with that.
Is there a way to rescue the dough if it's already too dry, too much flour?
That's a very good question. I don't know. I don't know, maybe sprinkling a little water on it and trying to knead it that way. Because usually the problem is it's too sticky. So this we're going to be doing for about 10, 15 minutes. And in the meantime that I'm doing this, I do the first rise. I do all my rises in my oven. I have a double oven, so it's really easy for me. One is dedicated to rising, one will be for baking. I put the oven on 100. I boil a small saucepan of water, turn off the oven, put the saucepan at the bottom, which I'll show you when I do it. And it creates a very nice, warm, humid environment for the dough to rise. If you don't have that or you don't want to do it, just find a place in your kitchen that doesn't have a draft. Okay, I think this needs a little more flour. All right, so I think we're going to be doing the kneading. So Rabbi, if you would like to do what you are best at, teaching us wonderfully.
Thank you. Yes, my son here, Samuel, he's having his bar mitzvah in a year, so he's taking over the mixing. And he does this more frequently than I do, actually. Camp Ramah has had a few different programs. Ramah Rockies had a program where my daughter learned how to bake challah, and Ramah Sports Academy this summer. So now my son makes challah every Shabbat with his sister, and occasionally my other son does too. So why do we have two challot? So many different things to learn about challah. And Edna, you're going to interrupt me and tell me when I should stop talking, okay?
Absolutely, thank you.
There's a definite end at noon, but before that even.
So, yeah.
So there are different ideas that I wanted to teach you about the customs about challah. So one of the concepts is that during the time of the temple, they had two showbreads of challah that were again across from the menorah. And it was more like two columns of challah, 6 in each row. So there were 10 chalot altogether, 12 chalot altogether. And that's why some people actually make sure that when they bake their challah, they have 12 braids in the challah to remember the time of the temple when they had the showbreads, which were chalot, in the temple in Jerusalem. Another idea of why we frequently have 2 challah. That's typically what you're supposed to have when you eat the challah on Shabbat, because remember that when we were in the desert and manna fell from the sky, that was our food, and they didn't have any manna on Shabbat because you couldn't collect it on Shabbat. They got a double portion of manna on Fridays so that they'd have extra for Shabbat. So zecher, to remember the time that we had the manna while we were in the desert, we now have 2 loaves of challah on Shabbat. Bread is the staff of life. It's the quintessential staple food. Now, usually if you have a meal and you're eating many different things, which bracha do you say first? You would say the hamotzi first, but not on Shabbat. If we remember, we have to sanctify, well, first we light the candles, and then we sanctify Shabbat with the saying of the kiddush, with the yayin, the wine, and we don't use the challah, but you would usually, if a regular meal, you would say the blessing for challah first. So there's the idea that why do we have the challah cover? To the different ways. We anthropomorphize the challah by saying we don't want to embarrass the challah, that it has to wait its turn till we're ready to say the blessing for hamotzi. We say the challah waits its turn till the wine is said the bracha, and then you take off the challah cover and you say the blessing for the challah. So one of the reasons why we have a challah cover. Another interesting idea of why we have the challah cover goes back to the manna again. So they say that the dew covered the manna when it was fell to the ground, and it encased the manna, like it was almost covering the manna, protecting it, the dew. So now we have a challah cover and also the challah board, the top and the bottom, a remembrance of the idea that the dew covered the manna when we were doing it. So much of our customs of the challah have to do back to what we always say, zecher li'tziat Mitzrayim, to remember the exodus from Egypt. I'll try to remember, makes me all hungry here, that when you're ready to say the blessing for the challah, many people hold it up. And remember, a lot of these are not written in stone things, it's customs that have taken place. So we put our 10 fingers around the challah when we hold the challah up, because it all goes back, everything in Judaism has a textual basis. In the Jerusalem Talmud, there are 2 types of Talmud, Babylonian and the Jerusalem. The Jerusalem Talmud, it says that people should do 10 religious duties related to agricultural obligations before one can eat the piece of bread. So by putting your 10 fingers on it, it's as if all these 10 fingers are doing those agricultural obligations before you actually say the challah. So the challah is also a sign that when we hold it up, we're saying, God help me fulfill this duty. God help me have the ability to have this challah in my house. And we always do everything we do to show our gratitude towards God. So then people often, before we get to the salt, we'll talk about if you have ever been to someone's home, they'll sometimes say bershut, that if it's not their own home, bershut means in permission, that they're asking permission of the balat habayit, or the bal habayit, the host or hostess, the owner of the home. Can I say the blessing on this challah? And then some people won't actually cut the challah with a knife. Now, why is that?
It does.
Yes. So why is that? I can tell you when my children were younger, we didn't cut it with the knife because we didn't want a knife on the table for anyone to get it. But more so, there's of course a more religious reason for it, that during the time of the Mishkan, the tabernacle used in the desert, and the temple, no iron tools were used to build it. So similar to the idea that our table is a mikdash ma'at, a mini altar, our own temple, since it's going to be like a mini altar, we don't use knives on it, just the way the temple wasn't used. Any metal items were not used to build that. Now it's a Sephardic custom that they tear the challah, and sometimes if you've ever witnessed this, it's quite an adventure. One thing I haven't instituted in my house, that they throw the challah to the people eating at the table. And why is that? So you realize that you're not directly getting the challah for the person giving it to you, but more so it's that God has given us the challah, that God has given us the ability to have this. And similar also that the manna fell from the sky, that literally the challah is falling on you when you reach for it. But Ashkenaz, like many of us are, we cut it with the knife because we're We like things more precise. So then people have, after they cut the challah, they eat it. Some people sprinkle salt on it. Some people dip it in salt. Some people don't at all. I can tell you, I remember once at in our seminary sukkah at JTS, in the Women's League Seminary Sukkah, which was wonderful that I was able to join Chancellor Ismar Shorsh at the time. And I remember sitting in our Women's League Sukkah at JTS, and we didn't have salt at the table. So what do? The main person who makes decisions in the movement in the 1990s at that time, he said, there is salt in the challah, we don't need additional salt.
Really?
Yeah, and it's true, we just put a lot of salt in. So that's one thing that Rabbi Shorsh said, at least it was in the, as we know the term now, the shat hadachak, in the moment that we were like literally sitting in the sukkah with 300 people and we had to figure out what to do. But why do you use salt sometimes? Because it's reminiscent of, again, the sacrifices that were made in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple, that all the sacrifices were sprinkled with salt. And these chalot, remember, it's a remembrance of our sacrifices that we used to make in the temple. And again, our table is an altar to God. So the salt's a great emblem of our relationship with our ancient heritage. Also, it was the original preservative of food. So we put that on the challah, and it represents the idea that we're continually been fed and nourished by our Judaism. So one of the ideas also in making challah is, and Edna, I still have time?
You have 2 minutes.
Okay, wow.
2-minute warning.
I have at least another half hour of material. Okay, so some people will say that this is a time of a sigula, like a type of remedy or merit or value, a measure, that it's, as we said, it's a very spiritual moment, seeing all these different ingredients come together, that it's a good time to make prayers, to think about all those people who are in need of healing, all the people who need just a pick-me-up. Think about yourself. Thank you, Sandy. I'll figure it out and put it together. And keep in mind everyone who needs prayers at this time. I know there's a custom that 40 people coming together to make challah for someone who's ill, and you keep them in your minds. One of the things I'll say in 1 minute, because I'm probably over my 2 minutes, is that
you're still 1 minute.
1 minute, okay. The concept of hafrashat challah, separating the challah. And that's again, because it said, it's as if one nullified the worship of idols. While one doesn't fulfill the mitzvah of separating challah, it's as if one sustains the worship of idols. Okay, so I'll tell you that you take hafrashat challah, an easy way to learn it, is that if you are making the most 59 ounces, which when I spoke to Edna about this, she said, I never make that much challah. But if you make such an amount of challah, you take a part of it, you throw it in and you burn it. Similar to the idea that you're making a sacrifice today, that you're not going to use all of it. It's a portion of the challah, it's taken, it's separated, and it usually was given to the Kohanim, because in the ancient days, the Kohanim didn't have their own supplies, we provided it for them. So it's burned and it's rendered inedible. So the hafrasat challah is a remembrance that the priests didn't have their own sustenance. So now we remember that it would have been what we would have given to the priests if we were still in the time of the temple. And mostly, another way is to ask God for divine favors at that time when you separate it. But it's a certain amount that you have to be making. And if it's a little less than that, and you say certain prayers, there's special prayers to be said in meditations as well. And then also, if it's a little less than that exact amount, you still separate it, but without a blessing. It's a little confusing, but as I've learned from Edna and also my sister who bakes challah every Shabbos, a lot of people don't make that large amount of challah to do this separation of challah. So that's why I didn't give as much of an explanation of this. Plus, it looks like Edna's all ready.
I'm ready.
Rabbi,
Okay.
we'll come back to you. We'll come back to you so you can give the rest of what you have.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so This is after 10 minutes, and if you notice, it's springing back, if you can see that. You could knead it longer. I now know for sure why I'm a bread machine person. You throw it all in, you turn it on, and you walk away from it.
Yes.
So, but this really turned out nice. This dough is really nice. So I'm going to spray the same bowl. There's no reason to clean the bowl. You can drizzle a little oil and swish it around. I'm putting it in, and I'm going to flip it so the top is oiled. And then I'm going to cover it with lightly with plastic wrap.
Edna, what happens if you under-knead it?
It won't rise. It has to look, there has to be a spring to it. And this all came together really nicely. This is the same way the dough looks when it comes out of the bread machine, so I know it's right.
Can you over-knead it?
You can definitely over-knead it. But that's hard to figure out until you're baking it. Okay, so this is, I'm gonna hold this up. This is the way my oven looks. I have the pan there and the way I have the rack. So the dough will fit right on the top. Everything's off. Now it's gonna rise for an hour, but I am putting the timer on for 40 minutes because the last 20 minutes I have to preheat the oven. So, and if you know your oven needs longer, then adjust it, but you need an hour rise. So I'm gonna put my timer on my watch because I'm going up for Psalms. And that's where we are now. And after that, I'll show you how to braid the challah in a few different ways. The oven is off, everything is off.
But you had it on set at 100 to warm it?
At 100. Because that's the lowest my oven will go. Some ovens don't go that low. So you might have to put it on the lowest temperature and leave it off and leave the door open a little bit because you don't want to start cooking the challah.
And can you just put a damp towel on it, or you want the plastic wrap right against the dough, or is it over the bowl?
I would do the plastic wrap because if this rises above and hits the top, you don't want the dough on the towel. You could put a towel over it, you could put a damp towel over it, but I don't like having to scrape the dough off a towel. And if you use a towel, you want to do it, don't use a terry cloth towel. Use a linen towel. They're a lot easier to clean.
If you forget an ingredient, can you go back and add it to the dough?
It depends on what ingredient you forget. I could not put the salt in if I would have realized it before I went through the whole baking process.
You said oil.
I don't know. I've never done that. That could be really tricky. I guess it goes down to, these are the things you have to try. I don't know. Let me address this one question about the raisins. If you use, and I lost this, if you use a bread machine, the raisins get put in about 10 minutes before the mixing process is done. You don't want to do it right away. You've got to get the ingredients to incorporate. Since that's the way I use it, that's what I'm used to. But if I wanted to do raisins in a hand kneaded dough, I would do it after the first rising, roll out the dough and sprinkle the raisins on it, and then just do like a jelly roll and go from there. I don't know how else to do it without having a problem with the kneading of it. That'd be really hard on your hands to knead raisins in the dough.
Edna, one more question. If someone used a bread machine to knead, do they need to put it in the oven, or that step is skipped as well?
The bread machine, I put in, not, the first rising is the bread machine. I don't have to do anything. I
Okay.
use the oven for the second rising after it's braided.
Okay. So yes, this oven step right now is skipped. It stays in the bread machine.
Correct, because that does a lovely job. I do have a recipe that I cannot rise in the bread machine because for some reason it just is like a volcano. So I only mix it in the bread machine and put it in a very huge bowl to put it in my oven, and it's still, one day I have to figure out why it does this, but it's such a good recipe that I just play with it.
And how much cinnamon, if you're measuring?
2 teaspoons, 2
I'm sorry?
teaspoons, 2 teaspoons. I didn't weigh that. I know it's 2 teaspoons.
So Edna, should the dough be sticky at all?
No,
Because mine was like a little sticky when I was done kneading it.
because that's why I kept adding flour.
I did. I kept adding it,
You
but
can add it now too, because you're gonna be breaking it up and then
I
you could
kneaded a
knead it
couple
a
of
little.
times before I braided.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
it
not a
wasn't
problem.
like, you know, it was just, I ended up using the bench scraper to get it off the counter.
Right.
Like a lot of people wanted to know earlier when you can put this in the fridge, like after it's braided.
After the first rising. I do that all the time.
You put it in the fridge after the first rising?
After the first rising, and then I take it out the next day. That's what I
Before
did.
you
I did
shape
an
it?
extra one just in case, because I was very nervous about doing it by hand. And this gives me more to be able to braid. But usually, because I usually don't have that block of time to do on a Friday. When life is normal, I'm not home all day.
Yeah.
So, and you just, I took it out, you take it out at like an hour, hour and a half ahead of time. And it's enough to be able to get it to in the ropes. But I do
But
that all the
can you
time. It's
shape it
real easy.
first?
What?
Can you braid it first and then put it in the fridge? And
I've
then
never
let it,
done that. I've never done it like that. But you have to, you've got to go through the first rising.
right.
I would suppose so. And then you'd probably eliminate a rising because it rises in the refrigerator. It's a cold rise.
Slower.
But I've never tried it without doing the second rise, even though it's huge when I take it out in the morning. And I know there are people that only do one rise for their challah. You know, this is the way I do it. And I don't want to go through all this mixing and to find out it doesn't work. So I'm just going to continue to do the way I do it.
And then someone said, Edna, if you freeze your yeast, do you have to let it warm up before you
No.
use it?
You do not. And I don't even use room temperature eggs. Usually I pull them right out of the refrigerator. The only time I use room temperature, if I think about it, I'll take the one out for the glazing because it's just easier to mix when it's warmer. But otherwise I don't do that.
Someone says, I don't think my dough worked because I'm in a very dry climate. It's going to be 105. What can you adjust if it's?
You shouldn't really have to if you weigh it. That takes all that atmospheric conditions. If it's really dry before you put it into rise, when you first start mixing it and it's really dry and crumbly, you should add water then.
When you had the pastry knife, is that a bench scraper or is it something else?
This is what I use, these. It's a bench scraper, plastic. I don't use metal because I use a silicone mat and I don't want holes in it, but a metal one is just as good.
Do you freeze your dough?
Here's a metal one. I do not freeze my dough. I've never done that. That's not saying you can't.
How do you store your bread flour, Edna?
I have large Tupperware containers and I just keep it on the shelf. Bread flour and all-purpose flour, I do not freeze. And lately I've been buying the all-purpose flour at Costco. So I had to get another container because I don't want to open 12 pounds of flour and just leave the bag open. That is an invitation for trouble. You've got to keep flour in an airtight container. especially if you're in an area that has a lot of little critters running around.
When you were doing the kneading and adding flour then, was that the same bread flour that you were using?
Yes,
Mix it in?
I always use the same flour that's in the recipe. If it was all-purpose flour, that's what I would use. There's also white whole wheat flour. If you don't like it as dark as this bread is, because this is a nice like tan. If you want it more white, use white whole wheat flour.
They make a black and white version at our kosher bakery. Like
Oh, really?
pumpernickel and
Wow.
whatever, white challah, and braid that together.
That would be fun.
People want to know where you got your shirt.
Oh, that of course is important. I'll put the link. I'll send Julia and Ellen the link, and they'll have a list. It's an Etsy thing, which I saw on a class I took. The woman whose Facebook page it is, she had a class by this young man, Israeli man who lives in Berlin, which one day I want to find out why that is. And he's called the Challah Prince, which we're going to do one of his braids. Now, he does a 7 braid, which I've only done last week, and I did one this morning. I love this braid. To me, it's very simple, but she was wearing this, and that was the big question through the whole class is please put the link up. So that's where I got it. I thought it was appropriate for today.
And people want to know whether they should be flouring their counter and their hands for the braiding now.
You absolutely could. That's the beauty of using a silicone mat. You don't have to do that. I don't like adding extra flour when it's not necessary because it tightens up the dough then.
What if you use parchment? Do you have to flour that?
You don't have to flour it, but you've got to clamp the parchment down because it's going to keep lifting. So here's a tip. Because I do that when I do sourdough, I use the baking pan and parchment, and I use these binder clips to hold the parchment down so it's not trailing all over the place. If you ever use parchment for a liner of your brownies or your banana bread or something, hold the parchment down with these. You can bake with them. It is a godsend. And
somebody was asking why you don't roll it out or braid it just on your granite.
I'm much happier on the silicone. I know there's nothing on it, and this is dedicated just for me using the dough. This is one of those, you have to feel comfortable doing what you're doing, and I'm more comfortable doing it this way. Yes, Eileen, silicone is a gift from heaven. Okay, so my dough is ready. So this is how it looks. And I have this nice warm bowl, and it's lovely. And I'm gonna take it out. And because I greased it, there's only a little bit sticking. That's it, it's done.
Edna, there's somebody who's really been asking a question. Max,
Okay.
she's written in the chat several times. She was the one who did not put the oil in, and she has a question specifically about the rising less than an hour. She's written many times. She's asking if she can be unmuted to ask her question again now. So let's see if we could find her question, because
I think she said that the challah is doubled now. Should she let it go longer?
Well, how much longer does she have?
Can she proceed with the braiding if it's less than an hour but already doubled?
Yeah, if it looks right, sure, she can do it.
Okay.
Okay, so
found her question. So she apparently forgot the oil, so I needed as much as could. Do you want to hear the rest of her question? So she needed as much as she could, but only rising for a half hour. However, it looks double in size. Should I braid less than the hour?
Wait a
She
minute, she
originally had
forgot
forgotten the oil.
in the recipe or in the pan, in the bowl?
In the recipe.
Oh,
That's what
boy.
I asked before, could she add it in?
I don't think so. I think it's just gonna pool. I don't know. I honestly, I would not want to tell her to do it because I don't know how it's gonna turn out. You know, it's like making an emulsion with things too. You have to add them at the right time to combine things. I don't know. I mean, she wants to try it. Fine, I'd love to know if it worked. Okay, so I have 3 pounds of dough here. And I'm going to divide this into 3 parts, which means I need a pound piece for each challah. I have other dough that I did last night, took it out this morning, and I'm going to take a piece out of that, 1 or 2 pieces, because I have 2 pounds there to do, I want to do 4 braids. So 4 different braids, not a 4 braid, but 4 different braids. So kind of eyeball it. Let me put this down. I got oil all over my hands. And this is where the scale is crucial, because there's nothing worse than having a challah that's done baking that's raw in the middle. Okay, so this is 14 ounces. This is over a pound, so we're going to take part of that off. This is a little over a pound, so let's see. That's too much. It's a pound. That's not enough. Okay. All right, I'm going to put 2 of these pieces aside. So the first one I want to show you is a 3 braid, which is the most traditional and the easiest one to do. And everybody has their own technique for doing this. So some people roll out their dough and then divide it. Some people weigh each rope. I don't do that. Okay, so, all right. So just take your hand and roll it. Now, here's the other thing. The longer the ropes you make, the flatter and skinnier your challah is going to be. I like challah to be plump. I like it to have some substance and height. So my ropes generally are not that long. You just need enough to be able to get enough braids in it. And this is, again, a personal choice. I like the way they look better. I like, especially if I'm going to use it for French toast or something the next day, if there's any left, I like a nice piece instead of a skinny, flat thing. Now, some people taper the ends. I don't taper the ends because that, to me, it gives you a much smaller end, and that's going to bake faster than this nice middle you have. So I like a challah that's kind of symmetrical. But again, that's a personal choice. Okay, so I've got 3 braids. You see one is bigger. I'm not that much of a perfectionist. Okay, so I start in the middle on a 3 braid. I don't start at the top. And if you've ever braided a child, your daughter's hair, it's the same thing. So it's over, 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 then I go under. I know it's fast. And then under, under, and go up as high as you can. And then I pinch the ends. I kind of squish it together and then I roll it. Okay, so when I do 3, I can fit them this way on my sheet instead of this way.
Edna,
Okay.
how long would you say each of those ropes were?
Let me see. Oh, hold on.
You do it on your board.
I have a ruler. Okay, inches. It's about 8 inches. Okay, so this is going to be a 6 braid. So here's my story of a 6 braid. I was very intrigued with them and I wanted to learn how to do it and I could not figure this out. So I sat myself down with a container of Play-Doh in front of YouTube and I did it until I got it. You don't want to overwork your dough. So sitting there for an hour, reworking your dough over and over again, you're not going to be able to use it. It's cheaper to go buy the Play-Doh. Okay, so now we have 6. Hopefully I'll be able to explain this. Now, if you do your dough, go through the first rising and put it in the refrigerator overnight, that's an easy way to cut your time down. Take it out an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours before you want to braid it. Otherwise, the braids are going to keep doing this. They're going to not give you the flexibility to roll it out. Okay. So here's 6. You okay to see that? Let's go back a little. And this you're going to pinch at the top. Okay, I spread them out so I have some. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So you take the outside one, you go all the way over to the other side. So you're going over that one. This is the underneath one, and you're going to take it back to there. And you're going to just continue this over. Now this one, instead of going over, goes down here, goes in the middle. Over, move this over, goes in the middle. Over, goes in the middle. Take this one, over. The one that you put over is going to be the one in the middle. Over, one in the middle. They're growing. The ropes are growing. Over, one in the middle. 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 This is kind of the end. Okay, so you could take it off. I watched a video, and that person took this piece, flattened it out, and stuck it at the bottom of the loaf. I tried that once and wound up with the braid over here. So, okay. So you're going to tuck this under, and you're going to squish it together. And again, you're going to roll it. And that's a 6 braid. And it's same amount, about 8 inches. Okay.
Why do you roll it, Edna?
It brings it all together, because sometimes you're going to have a braid that's sticking out a little bit, and it compacts it. I've only started doing this recently after I watched somebody do a class, and I go, that's really brilliant, because it's bringing it all to being a compact loaf. Okay, 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. It is really warm in this kitchen. It's either that or it's me. Okay. Now, this Challah prince, when he did this, he said he likes to roll the ropes fat in the middle and thin at the end. So he gets this really high loaf. I have yet to be able to do that. That's why he's the Challah prince and I'm watching him. Okay, so here we go. The screw. All right, so you want to set this up so you always have 4 braids on one side, which will change every time you do a braid, okay? So what you're going to do is these 2, you're going to take it and lift them up, take the outside braid, bring it over to the other side and put these down. Same thing now. Lift these 2, bring this over to the other side. And you're just going to keep repeating this. Lift, bring it over, bring it down. So you've got 4 and 3. Now I'm going to lift these and bring this under to that side. Lift, under, lift, under, lift, under, lift, under. And can you see it's forming a braid now? And it's growing again. Lift, under, 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 and just go as far as you can. Okay, I think that's about it. I'm going to cut this off. I'm going to put it under. I'm going to put this under. It got a little thin as I went. Okay, we're going to do a round one. This is the dough from last night. I don't make a turban. I have not been successful with it holding itself together. It opens up all the time. So I like this better. I'm still getting a round challah for the holiday. It's 15. There we go. Okay. All right, so this is 4 ropes, and you're going to make a basket weave.
So these are 1.5 pounds now?
They're a pound because I already used 1 pound of this dough.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so you see how it's a basket weave? So you take the one that's underneath and go over the top of the one next to it. Underneath, over the top, underneath, over the top, underneath, over the top. And now you're going to go the other way. Underneath, over the top, underneath, over the top, underneath, over the top, underneath, over the top. If you could do another one, that's great. I don't think I can, so I'm going to end this and just stick the ends in and turn it over. And I have a basket weave round challah. And I'm going to do that with this one just to make it quick braid. Okay, so Julia, if there are questions, this one I can talk and do.
For the second rise, do you heat the oven again and put the water in?
You can. My oven is still very warm and moist, so I'm just going to leave it alone.
And are you oiling your hands to do that?
No, absolutely not.
And Renee says she puts her turban in a round cake pan and then it stays.
Yeah, I'm a baker that doesn't like using pans. I like freeform, but that definitely works. The other thing is there are a lot of people that use different shape aluminum, those like disposable aluminum pans. If you really want a good crust on your dough, invest in a like professional grade heavy baking sheet. And that's what I use. And the heavier the pan, the more even the heat is distributed. When you start using throwaway aluminum pans, you're not going to get a bake like you would with something heavier. So you could get a heavy cake pan and do that. And certainly that would work. And there's ovals and all kinds of different shapes.
Have you ever made a vegan challah?
I have not. If You know, if somebody wanted it, I suppose I could try it, but I don't have anybody that needs that. Okay. Tuck them under, flip it over. I actually like the other side better. Okay, so I have another pan. And now that I have 2 pans, I'm going to use both ovens. Well, I'm going to rise it in that one. I'm just going to set the racks differently. Or now's the time I can take the pan out. And I'm just going to use that oven. And I don't cover them. I've never covered them. I don't oil them. And I'm going to set this for 40 minutes. And this is the one after 40 minutes, I'm going to preheat the oven. So I still have an oven that's available. So I'm going to do a little challah with what's left over.
And it's a cooler temperature for convection, right?
It's 25 degrees cooler. And I'm only doing convection because that was the direction from this recipe. This is the only challah I do convection. But you can do it at 350 regular. Okay. All right.
And if you didn't have a silicone sheet, do you oil the baking sheet?
I use parchment paper. The less oil you use, the better. You don't want to keep adding things. That's why you want to get your dough the right texture before you start doing things. If you keep adding flour, it's going to get hard and it's going to get dried out. If you keep adding oil to what you're doing, the oil's going in the dough. You don't want a real oily dough. When I do the dough in the bread machine, I never oil anything. I only did it because we were rising it in a bowl.
And the rabbi's going to speak again when.
Terrific. Yay.
Yes, is this a good time?
It is a perfect time. We have
a good time for her.
an hour till this gets done.
Oh, I'm not going to speak for an hour, but okay.
Oh, come on, you can do it.
I could, but I don't want everybody falling asleep.
We have another break too after, so.
Okay, when is the break?
Well, we're just meeting up again at 2.
Oh, okay.
So-
All right. So I'll give everyone a break. So I have to say that I'm braiding my challah, my dough later because my baking partner had his bar mitzvah lesson. So he left me. Yeah. The instructor's donating blood today. I said during his usual time, I said, you're doing a mitzvah. That's good. So we'll braid together as a family. So I was going to go back a little bit about the hafrasat challah. Because I have to say, when I think of making challah, I think of that, and because I don't bake too often, but I always thought you had to always do it, but it was the amount of flour that you're actually using. So just a few texts about this, and then I wanted to talk about some of the specific ingredients that are put into the challah and different ways to think about it. So one of the verses that talks about challah is from Ezekiel chapter 44, verse 30. You shall give the first yield of your dough to the Kohen to make a blessing upon your house. So this is the origin, that we would give part of the challah to the priest. It's also reminiscent of giving the dough offering. So specifically the dough offering that was brought to the Kohen. So every time bread was made, a part of that dough was separated and baked for the priest. So clearly now we don't do that because we don't have the temple in Jerusalem. But to remember this, we now have this concept of hafrasat challah, the portion of the challah that's taken and separated. And instead of giving it to the Kohanim, you burn part of it so it's inedible. And it commemorates this interdependence between the Israelites and the Kohanim, the priests, that still shows that as community members, we depend on each other. And it's a way to ask that God's divine favor will be in your home. So when do you do this? When you use more than 59 ounces, which apparently is 1.6 kilograms of either wheat, rye, barley, oat, or spelt flour. So that's the amount of flour that you're using. So that's a huge amount of flour.
Yeah.
And you mix it together with the liquid and the flour together after the dough is kneaded, before it's shaped into loaves. So it would have been before we did this, if you're actually making that much with that much flour. And you place it into a single bowl and you recite the following prayer. Now, Ashkenazim say this, and I'll translate it, and then I'll tell you the part that's a little different for Sephardic. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahafris challah, which means, blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who sanctifies us with God's commandments and commanded us to separate challah. That's what the Ashkenazim say. And the Sephardim, instead of saying challah, they say truma, which is the type of sacrifice. Now, that is if you use this amount of flour. If you use a different amount, almost 53, I think it was. It's more than 43 ounces and less than 49 ounces. You separate it, and that's the amount of flour, but you don't say the bracha. And then afterwards, that part that you take out, you say, Harei zo challah. This is challah. And you make an announcement and you burn that part. There's some meditations that people say after this. And also at this time of taking the challah out, it's a good time to add some special prayers for yourself, your loved ones, if someone is in need of healing. A lot of the challah is related to what people had traditionally in the past seen as women, what we were doing in terms of marriage and children. So the hafrasat challah, there's an acronym for, or I don't know if the word is an acronym, but there's a letter for every word that it means. So the hey, that you have hatzlacha, success. Fe, parnasa, livelihood. Reish, refuah shlema, that you have a speedy recovery. The sin, shalom bayit, or the shin, peace in the home. The taf, tefillah, that our prayers will be accepted. Now, what does the challah stand for? This is the part that I don't think expresses for every woman today, but the chet was for chuppah, marriage, lamed, leida, kala, to have an easy birth, and the hay is hod, majesty for God. So this is some of those ideas. So the time, I hope that we all have been able to make our special prayers during this time. And I'm to think about how the flour even came to be. So much work had to go into that. First, you have to think about it from the farm till how it got to your table, to your kitchen. So it shows our appreciation for every ingredient. If you think the soil had to be plowed, the grains had to be planted and watered, the crops had to be reaped, the kernels had to be sifted. And in all this, why am I telling you this? Because we need to realize that God's hand was in all of this to show our appreciation that God helped this all happen. And it shows that we don't take what we do and take it for granted, that we do it for God. And why do we do it? And how can we do it? Because of God's loving kindness, the chesed, which goes along with what we were reading in the Psalm today, if people were at the Psalm class. So there's a midrash that taking the challah claims that one fulfills a mitzvah, that you're nullifying all idol worship because you're so connecting yourself to God. Taking challah causes you to pause, the introspection. It connects to Elul, that the cheshbon hanefesh, the introspection and reflection that we do now. And all that we do is a gift from God. And we have to think about how we're doing this is truly a gift, enjoying the present moment. And especially, I think, when you do it with people. And today we get to do it with close to 200 of our closest sisters here. When was challah first made? One of my favorite Torah portions was my daughter's bat mitzvah. When the angels come to visit Abraham, and Abraham says to her, Lushi va'asi ugot. What were these? So go quickly and sift up and make flour and cakes. What were these cakes? Was the challah. And it was the connection to Sarah's bread that stayed. She apparently made challah that lasted from Friday to Friday. And there was a cloud. This cloud was the Shekhinah, the feminine aspect of God, that presided on her tent because she made this challah. And what was one of the first times we heard about her challah? When she made it for the angels that visited Abraham, who said, you're going to be a father soon. So baking challah, just the way that Sarah brought the Shekhinah, God's feminine image, into her house, so too when we bake challah, we bring God's Shekhinah into our house as well. So some of the ideas of the different parts that go into making the challah, you know, we quickly put all of our ingredients together before. So the kneading the dough, it's a time of spiritual endeavor. It's a physical movement that you're physically doing, but as you knead it, as we've said, you put your love and your soul, your nefesh, into the kneading. It's truly what we call an Eitz Ratzon. It's a special time, a prayer for peace in the home and the world that will create a unity around us, just the way those ingredients came together and created a unity, that we pray that we'll have unity both within our home, within the Jewish community, and the greater humanity, that we'll have this peace and unity around all of us. One of the ideas about flour, how is flour made, that you have to sift through the flour. And as we're doing this, we can sift through our thoughts, our speech, our actions. You could see there's not a lot of time to talk during this. You have to be very intensely thinking about it and concentrating. I see Cindy agreeing. You can't, you're in the moment. And it really teaches us to sift through all the other stuff going around us and remove that other stuff, remove the impurities and the desires of the Yetzer Hara, that they say, the evil inclination, that the flour connects us to all of that. We have the liquid, which, what was the liquid we used? The water. I said this earlier, that water is a life force. It's our nourishment. It's the symbol of Torah. So when we put the water in, we put in our life and our Torah. And we can't live without water. We can't live without Torah as well. There's specific amounts that we need as well. So the specific amounts of balancing your life. Then I'm going to tell you about the fresh yeast. So yeast is a live organism. It needs tender care to grow. You need to feed it. What do we connect it with? The sugar, which I'll talk about shortly, the sweetness of that. But the yeast enables things to grow, to expand. And as you put in the yeast, you can think about that moment that you're thinking about how you pray that your loved ones will also grow, both physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. This is a word I never knew because I never made challah in Israel, and I don't use the Hebrew word, but yeast is shamarim. So it's the same root as shin mem resh, which is to protect. That it's a protection, it's a shmirah, it's a protection of all of us. And as you do this, you add the yeast, you pray for protection. That you pray for that the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, and the Ayin Hara, the evil eye, will protect you, just as this yeast is protecting everything coming together to unify everything. And I mentioned the sugar. We all know sugar, especially this month. I loved that people were saying, can you add honey? That the honey is to add sweetness, that our speech will be pure, that everything and sweet, and our speech will be sweet, that coming into it will be pleasant. Torah is sweet. And that we have a discipline in life with the sweetness to remember that we, with the bitter, we need the sweetness. We have the little bit of salt to remind you too, perhaps the salt of, I haven't gotten up to my salt things, but now I'm rushing to it. The salt, a little bit, of course, the korbanot, the sacrifices that we used to bring. And also you can think about the salt of the salty tears, that sometimes memories come together. I just see my mother in the chat wrote that her mother-in-law, my mama, Ma Celia, used to make slits at the ends of the round challah to make it look like a hand that we're reaching for blessings. And Yom Kippur made the shape of a ladder. My Celia was something else. So the salt is the salty tears that we remember, the remembrances that we have together. I know I'll always remember this summer as like that my kids had to make challah every Shabbos. Even though we have the best challah in Deal, the food is great here, the challah is fantastic, they need their own challah themselves. So that's the sugar. Of course, the egg. That represents the continuity of the circle of life. That goes again to our psalm that we read today too, about the circle of life. It's a reminder to view ourselves as individuals within the greater framework. Remember of those who come after us and those who came before us. And of course, the egg is the female role in creation. And this I found fascinating. I never understood why in Brooklyn you could have always picked the egg challah and not the egg challah. What's the difference? So apparently in ancient times, they didn't even contain challah. Edna had mentioned this earlier about the dough not rising. So the challah used to be more like flatbread without eggs. Sephardic Jews, maybe some of them don't put eggs in their challah. Ashkenazim, it's traditional to add eggs to your challah. But apparently in the Sephardic community, they don't put eggs in their challah. Did you know that, Edna?
Yes.
Okay.
The recipe from the challah prince had no eggs in it.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was eating white bread.
So I'm wondering if that's why the challah we get in deal, which is Syrian, is why that's so good. But I don't know. So that's the egg. What else? Other ingredient did we have? The oil. The oil, remember, was what was used to anoint kings. And as you add the oil, you can think about your loved ones and their specific needs. And, you know, like anoint them in making your challah. Oil makes things soft. And also that our words will be soft, our actions will be soft. Perhaps you could think about your soft words that you'll use over Shabbat. Those of us who might not use electronics, we have to interact with people more. So hopefully your interactions over Shabbat will be soft and kind. The personal spiritual energy that you put into the challah. And all of this comes together to put your own neshama right in to the challah, that it's made with love. I love listening to Edna. We've had several conversations about how one of the things I think you really enjoy about making challah is giving it to your loved ones and seeing the joy in their face when they make it and when they eat it. And that you know that when you make it, you put your love into it as well. So this wonderful book that my colleagues have told me about, meaning my women on the committee here, it's called, oh, you can see it, Spiritual Kneading, Thoughts for Jewish Months. And it actually gives a different recipe for every month of the year for challah, putting things in that you have to make sure what meals you're planning with the challah, because some of the recipes are milchig, because they put some dairy products into it, but really some fascinating recipes. And if you have this one, it's incredible. There's no picture of the one where you make the ladder or the key. The key is the key one. Yeah. When it comes time for making the key, you'll see it all on Facebook and Instagram. Everyone puts on their social media. So I think this is a wonderful activity that we've done together. Yasha Koach, Edna, you're truly amazing. I don't know how you remember all that braiding. And I'm turning it over to you now.
Can I just add something? Thank you so much for bringing in Sarah and the challah, because I look at it modern times of the generations that have baked, and now I'm passing this on to my grandchildren to bake it. Now my 4-year-old granddaughter has this imprinted in her brain. That's something she can do and something she can do with grandma. But to know that the challah goes back to our beginning, that is so wonderful to know. I really, really appreciate that. Okay.
Thank you. There is such a connection to the past, the present, the future. And it's something that no matter what someone's connection to Judaism, people know about challah. And they call it different things in different parts of the country. So in at least New York, some people can pronounce it challah bread. Instead of challah, they said chali. So more like holly. But is there anything else that you wanted me to touch on or add?
I think this was terrific. Thank you. I love that bread too. You and I had talked about the book. You and I had talked about it, and it gives all the different shapes. And I started doing the key challah, which is the first Shabbat after Pesach. When I saw it on Facebook, I said, what a wonderful thing to do, that you're marking the beginning of the regular part of the year after we've gone through all this. And, you know, bringing in all these things and then bringing it to other people. I'm not sure if I love doing the baking more than I love teaching it, because if I can give one more person the thought that they could do this on their own, it was worth it, because it's just such a wonderful thing to do. I don't eat challah from a bakery anymore. It just doesn't taste the same to me. And I got my family like that too. So I have my work cut out for me, but that's okay. I love it.
Deb Green said her grandmother grated boiled potatoes into the challah dough, and it
Ooh,
was the best challah
ooh,
she had.
ooh, it's kind of like mashed potatoes in it. That's yummy. I'm sure if we found different communities, we'd find different things that they put in it or different customs. I know my family tears the challah. It wasn't for any specific reason. We like it. And what I like about it is when you tear it, you see those strands of gluten, and it just, it's this whole sensory experience from a loaf of bread. Yeah, I know people that do make 5 pounds of flour for their batches of challah. I can't even imagine doing that, but they give a lot of it away. But that's huge, because I'm
And
doing what?
I get the 6-pound bag of high gluten flour, and I do 6 pounds at a time.
6
And
pounds?
I do it, yeah, so I get about 6 to 8 challahs, depending on what size I make them. And I go through the braiding, and then I freeze it. And then each Shabbat, Friday morning, I'll take it out, put it on a tray, and let it rise. And this way I have a fresh baked one, and I don't do it every week. I do it every couple
Yeah.
months, basically. Sometimes I
Yeah.
give some away.
Because I usually do 3 at a time, because it's only 2 of us now. Whenever we can have a family Shabbat dinner again, I'll make 2. Although I have 2 grandchildren, son and daughter-in-law. The grandchildren, the son and the daughter-in-law each have different challahs, so there's no reason to make a lot. And I just freeze a lot.
No. So someone said, do you freeze your baked challah? No, I freeze it prior to baking. And
I freeze it when I bake it. And I'll use one of these tomorrow. It'll go in the freezer tonight, thaw tomorrow, and then I'm gonna warm it. I'll say something later. I like it to be 100% fresh for Shabbat. I don't want yesterday's challah. And I find this is an easy way to do it. Most people don't do that. And you can't tell the difference. And the best part is, and the whole house smells like it should on Shabbat. Because now it smells like Shabbat, and it's not Shabbat.
Somebody asked, which is better to freeze, before second rise, after second rise, or baked challah?
I only freeze it baked, but people do it after it's braided.
Right, that's what I do. And then let it defrost and rise.
The key is to always defrost bread in the plastic bag you've frozen it in, because it needs the moisture to thaw right. And then you could take it out and do what you want.
Edna, how long do you like your bread to defrost?
I usually take it out in the morning, and for sure 3 hours, because I like it thawed before I warm it in the oven. I don't want the outsides to be thawed and then the inside still frozen. And that seems to work pretty well. Let me answer one question. I thaw on my stovetop because I like there to be air underneath. I don't do it on a counter, so the dough is thawing on a granite top. I also, so now that we've started, so what I do, what I said previously, the challah that I baked today, I'm gonna freeze, even the one I'm using tomorrow. I like it to be 100% fresh for Shabbat. I'll take it out in the morning, keep it in the plastic bag, and then right before we're ready to eat it, I heat it in a 325 oven for 8 minutes, not covered, on the baking rack. So it gets all that air circulating, and it smells wonderful, and it comes out just like you took it out from baking it. So that's what we do. Okay, so Paula Scheuer. Ellen, remind me the date.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, well.
It's
all
right around, it's the week before Tu B'Shvat.
Tu B'Shvat. So we're doing Tu B'Shvat special. And most of us know Paula Scheuer because she loves coming to Women's League conventions and events. And she will be doing the food end. She's going to demo 3 separate dishes that all have multiple ingredients that will tie in with what we do for Tu B'Shvat. And then the education committee will do the teaching part of it.
She's going to, I hope, use things that you would find. It's all plant-based, obviously, and so therefore healthy, and she is very big on healthful kinds of things. And then we will, hopefully, she'll use things that, vegetables and fruits that would be found in Israel. And what we will do is we will create some sort of and model some sort of a Tu B'Shvat Seder. It's not the kind of Seder that we're usually used to, but lots of organizations have done it. So we're hoping that with Paula, in conjunction with the idea of Tu B'Shvat, a holiday that we generally don't do as much for, we can create something really new and different for all of us to kind of partake of, not knowing where we'll be in January. Yeah. So at any rate, this will be another part of the education kind of theme that we're utilizing this year, which really is to bring a lot of life to some of these things and some of these holidays and celebrations that we might not be participating in as much as we might like. So it's on the schedule. It's the 3rd week in January. We still hadn't resolved the date, but it will be probably that week before Tu B'Shvat. So whatever she does that day, you will have time to cook it, prepare it, and be ready. And we're hoping that with all the things, for example, that you're taking, the ideas that you're taking from this, the spirituality that you're taking from the day with Challahs and Edna, that you'll do the same kind of thing with Tu B'Shvat and bring that into your family as a new celebration. If you haven't been doing anything more than, you know, when you were in religious school and you had the little bag of whatever it was, you know, the fruits and so forth. But this will be a new dimension on, hopefully, on Tu B'Shvat. So that's one thing we are doing. Julia?
It's going to be at 3 o'clock Eastern time. We'll figure out the date. But she's really excited about pairing her her plant-based menus. She's going to share the recipes with us. And she's just wonderful. If you've never been in a class with her, it's very exciting. And we're thrilled that she's doing this.
When we had the convention, the last convention prior to this immediate one, she was one of the authors that was part of that meet the authors very quickly that, you know, that I think there were like 3 or 4. She was one. She's from the DC area. She's from Bethesda. So, Julie, you want to talk about anything else?
Yeah, I wanted to highlight 2 things that are coming up next week.
This is the book that it's coming from.
Okay. So let's post that, the name of that.
And she's sharing the recipe, so you don't have to buy the book.
Okay.
So 2 things coming up next week. The first is on Tuesday. This is going to be immediately after Psalms, so at 12:30 on the same Psalm link that everybody's on. And Toby Holtzman and Debbie Lempert, who are the chairs of our virtual Tefillot committee, are going to be doing a discussion of how to prepare yourself and your home for the holidays, because many of us will be on Zoom for the first time. It'll be a different holiday experience. And so they're going to give us some suggestions for how we can set up the environment to provide a spiritual experience. I know sitting in my kitchen or at the desk with everything I have to do all around me does not necessarily lead to a spiritual experience for me on Zoom. So that will be Tuesday, again, 12:30, right after Psalms. And then the next thing is our first personal conversations of the year, which is going to be next Thursday, a week from today at 8 o'clock. And the topic is keeping family relationships spiritually and emotionally healthy. So there will be a rabbi and a psychologist talking, and they'll talk about how you can deal with the family you've been quarantining with, if you're ready to come to blows, or the family that you haven't been able to see because you're quarantining, and the issues that brings up. So those are two to start off the year right away, and watch for more information. We just rolled out the information on our Bat Mitzvah initiative. That's going to be a 3-year-long program. So more to come on that.
And with that one, with next week, with the families and, that you've been quarantining with, it's also, did you mention the politics too? That, in this time of, oh, sure, no problem with politics and so forth. Getting along with family that might have different opinions than you have. So that's also one of the things that the rabbi and the psychologist are going to handle. All these interesting things. All right. So
Ellen, there was a question about the registering and the link for those programs, and they are all on Women's League Week, which comes out on Tuesday. It came out yesterday, and I'd like to remind everyone that if they don't get Women's League Week, please put your name and your email in the chat, and we will make sure that you are subscribed and get those messages and the newsletter called Women's League Week. Again, it comes out on Tuesday. Put your name in the chat, and I will make sure that you get it. Thank you.
that has all the Zoom, links and everything. It's really a great piece to have near you. So it makes your Women's League life a lot easier. Everything is in one spot. I think that we have kind of, how close are we to?
We have 6 minutes, but I could start doing it. Also, Ellen and Julia, I sent you the link for the t-shirt. So
Okay.
on your message. So if you could put it on the chat, that would be great.
All right.
You were asked a question though, Julia, actually from Jill, about the bat mitzvah class. Can you answer? What is
So the bat mitzvah class will be like an introduction to Judaism. It's really designed for people who either didn't have a bat mitzvah or had a bat mitzvah and haven't done anything since then, or had a bat mitzvah, but it was on a Friday night, or when women weren't expected to be doing very much. So it's more kind of an educational program than specific Haftorah, Torah laning and trope. That might come further on, but that's not going to be for this first year. It's really for have a safe place for people to learn at a beginner level.
And we will have a program, a formal bat mitzvah kind of program. And it's anticipated that it'll be kind of a siyum experience at the next convention. We'll figure it all out. Everybody will get to participate in some way. And it really will be a happening, and a very meaningful happening. And one of the things that we are doing is really trying to stress the spirituality of these educational experiences. So if you fit in any of those categories, please feel free to sign up. for the bat mitzvah classes. We are anticipating those to be once a month for an hour to an hour and a half, depending on what we have to teach. And they usually on Thursday nights. It's not specifically one particular Thursday of each month. We will give the dates out. We have them calendared in, but we tried to go against very few other activities that were already on the calendar. So it's really pretty doable. I think, you know, people will enjoy discussing the kinds of things that are in this curriculum. It's very topical. A number of you have had questions about the reading Hebrew class, and some of the things that you said you really wanted to learn will actually be handled in the bat mitzvah class. They will not be handled in the reading Hebrew class, but they will be handled in the bat mitzvah class. So this is the time, as Julia said, in a very safe place, to fill in the gaps, to learn for the sake of learning Torah Lishma, and to just take care of some of the things that may have been bothering you as things that are lacking in your Jewish education, your Jewish presence, whatever. So we're here, and you can certainly send an email to either one of us. We will answer you if you have a question.
And also, if you're not sure whether this is right for you, the link that's in Women's League Week is for just the first session, which is going to be on September 24th. And that'll be like an information session. And there'll be some teaching and learning going on too. But come to that first session. You're not committing to anything by signing up, and you can see if it's something you would want to continue on.
That's for the bat mitzvah only. The Hebrew is a commitment because we have one teacher and a very full group of women that already have expressed interest. The bat mitzvah, we have a lot more flexibility. The Hebrew reading is very basic. It's just learning alphabet. And then we will raise the level for the next session of courses, whatever they are, and so forth. Okay?
Okay,
All right,
we're ready?
There
Are we
go.
ready?
Perfect.
Okay, all right, so as per usual, when you're doing something in front of people, they don't always turn out like you like them. These got very long because it's very warm in here, but I will show you. I did this one this morning, and this is it baked. This is a 7 braid baked, and the toppings are white and black sesame seeds, poppy seeds, and oatmeal. And I will tell you where this came from. So for the 60th anniversary of the State of Israel, my family went on mission from the Federation. And I don't know anybody that's been on it. I've never been wined and dined so much in my life. And we went to this most magnificent restaurant in Jerusalem. It was really like a event place overlooking Jerusalem. So I have, yeah, it's just important to me to remember that. And I don't know what they served for dinner. I have no idea. All I can tell you is what the roll looked like. And the roll was divided into 4 parts. And this is what they had on it. Oatmeal, somebody needs to mute. Oatmeal, white sesame, black sesame, and black poppy seed. So when I do this, I call this my ode to Israel. And I think about my trip every time I do this. I do this, and lately I've been doing everything but the bagel. I love it. I like savory challah. My grandchildren like raisin and sweetness, and that's fine. I'll eat it, but I prefer savory. So this is what we do. I took an egg and beat it, and then added a tablespoon of water and used a whisk. I use a silicone brush to brush. I don't use a bristle brush. I like the way this cleans better, and I don't use a feather. And then again, use whatever you want. So I'm gonna paint the egg wash on. And there's millions of toppings you can put on. If you want to just make it a little sweeter, put cinnamon sugar on the top. This is the egg that I took take out ahead of time. I just think it works better warm. So when you start doing your challah, that's the time to take this egg out and put it on the counter. Oh. And I'm pretty generous with this. I like it all to be shiny. I know some people only use an egg yolk. Some people use an egg and an egg white. You know, this is a time to experiment with these things. If you've never done this before, do it one way one week, do it another way another week. Get it to where you really want it. Wow, I got it on one. Oh, scrambled eggs. Okay. All right, so to have this stuff stick, and there's really no rhyme or reason, because trying to figure out if you put the poppy seeds here and the sesame seeds, forget it. So just stick your finger in the egg and just start with whatever you want to start with. You don't have to top it. You can just do the egg wash, and definitely do the egg wash, because it really makes a more finished product. Then otherwise it's not going to be shiny.
Edna, can you just point out what kind of mat that is in your tray?
This is a silpat, and it looks like this. And I just don't like using, I like parchment paper in principle. I don't like using things I have to keep throwing away. And this really makes the challah, or anything you make on it, bake very well. And then you don't have to clean the pan. That's the other thing I didn't mention about weighing ingredients. You don't have a million measuring spoons and cups to clean. That's it. I have 2 little spoons to clean, and that's it, from the yeast and the salt. Okay, what am I going to do with this? If you're looking for black sesame seeds and you can't find them where the spices are, look in the Asian aisle. Okay. All right. You can use nigella seeds also. They look like black sesame seeds, but they have a little different flavor. I'm not doing this one because I'm going to do the everything but the bagel. Now, some people just sprinkle it over. Again, this is your preference to do. These are your creations. This is just a lesson in how to do it. But please experiment, and please find what you like the best and what your family likes, and then go for it and try different things. If you want a really good apple challah for Rosh Hashanah, go on the King Arthur Baking Company website and put harvest apple challah. I will tell you, you may not eat dinner once you have that. It is the most delicious thing, and it's gorgeous. It looks like a crown when you're done, because it's kind of like monkey bread, and you do it in a springform pan. It is magnificent. It's messy to make, I'm telling you ahead of time, but it's worth every last thing you have to do for it. And that I make for Rosh Hashanah and Sukkot every year. I never make it any other time. There are a lot of YouTube videos you could go look at. There's a lot of Facebook pages. you know, start exploring them. Maybe now it's not the time to do it because it's right before the holiday. But when you have time, you know, enjoy it, try it, experiment. You know, like I said, I made the challah recipe from the challah prince because he was going to show me how to do these braids. I won't make it again. I didn't like it, but that's my preference. And I like dough that has egg in it. I think it looks nicer. But his braids are unbelievable. If you just want to sit there and go, oh my God, how does this man do this? It's absolutely incredible what he does. And he's doing it in this little bitty kitchen in Berlin that's about as big as right here. That's how he does it all.
Edna, what is the name brand of the scale that you like to use?
Mine is Salter, S-A-L-T-E-R. I've had it for years. I really like it. And if you didn't hear my pointer in the beginning, please have extra batteries on hand, because there is nothing more frustrating to be in the middle of weighing something and your battery goes.
Edna, if the braid collapsed or blended, does that mean the dough was too moist?
It was either too moist or it's overproofed. Because it shouldn't collapse. Okay, so I'm just gonna sprinkle this on and then we're gonna bake them.
Overproofed means it was risen too long?
Too long. Or it might have been too warm. Your environment was too warm.
Will it still be edible?
You might be able to eat it. I don't know if you're gonna like it. Okay, it's going in. So because I have 3 1-pound loaves, I'm gonna do it for 20 minutes first and then see, and then I will, oh, I forgot this. Take the temperature. If you do not have a thermometer, first of all, take a look. If your challah is brown or getting there, then you're pretty close to it being done. But hold on one second. Let me put this on. But if you don't have a thermometer, lift the challah, turn it over, and tap it. Hear it? It's very hollow. If it's not hollow, that means it's not baked all the way through. And there's nothing worse than having challah that has doughy in the middle. So you don't need a thermometer. I just like using all these things that are going to help me get successful, because there's a lot of work involved in these. And if it's something you're going to do on a regular basis, if you don't have a scale, invest in a scale. They're $10 and $15. If you don't have a thermometer, I have this, I think, got a Bed Bath & Beyond or something. This is not expensive. It's an instant read thermometer. And it's instant read. You don't have to stand there and wait for it to calibrate. But, you know, I love doing this, but I also don't want to add more work to what I do because this is time consuming. For me, if you go from beginning to end in one day as a 4-hour chunk of time, that's a lot of time to screw it up. And I can tell you after I just had the screw up with the missing the salt, and this was an order of somebody that's paying for it. So I couldn't even attempt to pull that off. And we tried it. The first bite tasted okay. After that, it went in the compost pile.
What should the temperature be, Edna? What should it be?
190. The center is 190. And it goes very quickly from like 185 to 190. It might be 3 minutes. I hope everybody's got to a point where they could glaze and top them if they want. If you don't, they're going to be beautiful just glazed. And please, if you have questions after, my email address is on the recipe. Also, my phone number is. Please do not hesitate to contact me. I really want to help you be successful. If it's something I can't help you with, I'll let you know.
Somebody asked if you could freeze the challah before baking.
Well, some people do that. They braid it and then they freeze it.
I do that. It works out fine.
Okay.
And then will the bread collapse if you insert the thermometer into it?
Oh no, it's baked. This, let's see. I will show you exactly. This is, the hole is still there. This is what I did.
So if you were to freeze it, would you cool it thoroughly before? Well, this is a baked challah. You freeze.
Oh,
If
a
you,
baked challah, I take it out in the morning. I put it on my stovetop or a cooling rack, something so it's not sitting on top of a surface so it collects the moisture underneath. You want moisture in it, but not that kind of moisture.
right, they're asking how long, if you're going to freeze these when you're going to take them out of the oven, should you freeze them cool or a little warm?
Oh no, never bag a challah that's warm. You are asking for trouble. You get mold. Let it cool really well.
They want you to demonstrate, please, again, what it should sound like when you
Sure,
on it.
absolutely. Maybe I should put it by my microphone.
Yeah.
How's that? Can you hear that? It's like a little applause. And then the bottom too. Look at the bottom. This is a nice color. If it's going to be really tan, it's not cooked. And even if you're warming it up for 8 minutes at 325, it's not going to cook your challah.
Edna, do you want to do a little plug for Legacy?
Oh, sure. I'd love to do a Thank you for asking, Ellen.
No problem.
So Torah Fund Legacy Society is our planned giving part of Torah Fund. And I'm sure you'll notice in your mail, every organization and school that you've attended or your kids attended or your friends attended, you are sending, they're sending you something for planned giving. And it has become very apparent to us that the continuation of having our seminaries stay viable, having our graduates be able to go, having our students be able to go, because we are a big part of how they are successful. Ask anybody that's graduated from any one of our 5 seminaries. They will very quickly tell you if it wasn't for Torah Fund, they would not be where they are. So that's great. And we love being Torah Fund contributors now, but we've got to look to the future. It's just like making the challah. So I'm a continuation of my grandmother. My mother never baked bread. She was a great baker and a great cook, but somehow she didn't bake bread. But I'm passing it on to my grandchildren, and my daughter bakes wonderful challah. So I think of it that way, that I have to be responsible to give them the knowledge and spending this time with them to do it. Just like down the road, and I hope it's in 100 years when I'm not here, I can still be part of the success of our 5 seminaries. And I love belonging to a conservative synagogue. I love our clergy. I've loved the ones that we've graduated to their own pulpits. And we really have to think about it. The best part about a legacy society is there is no minimum, there's no maximum. May we all be able to give millions of dollars, but that's not the reality. It is not today's money. It is money way down the road. But we just want everybody to start thinking about what will happen if this isn't continued. So if you have any questions about this, please use the same email. I'll be very happy to talk to you. If you become a member of Legacy Society and send in your declaration of intent, you will be getting this lovely charm, which I'm sure you can't see, that says Atid, which means the future, on front and back. And this gets moved every year. So it's not a permanent attachment. And I will tell you, it is very much a sense of pride when I'm in shul, whenever that will be again. And somebody comes up to me and goes, wait a minute, I have a Torah Fund pin. What's that hanging from there? Perfect opportunity to tell them, the elevator pitch. But it's something that we need to think about, Lador Vador. We need to do something about this. So I'm available anytime. Thank you, Ellen, for asking.
Are there any other questions related to Challah or the Legacy Society? Rabbi?
No, I wanted to ask Ellen, Edna, if you wanted me to read the traditional declaration that's recited after you do Hafrasat Challah. I know
Absolutely.
we didn't take the Challah necessarily, but so you can hear the words.
Absolutely, thank you.
Opportunity to make challah with so much flour. So I'll read it in English so we all understand it. May it be your will, our God, the God of our ancestors, that the mitzvah of separating challah be considered as if I observed every one of its details. May my raising of the challah be considered as a sacrifice that was offered on the altar, which was willingly accepted. Just as giving the challah to the Kohen in the past served to atone for my sins, so may atone for my sins now, and I shall be like a person reborn, free of sin and transgression. May I be able to observe the holy Shabbat and festivals with my family and be nourished from the holiness of these days. May the influence of the mitzvah of challah enable us and my entire family to always be nourished by the hands of the Holy One. Blessed be God. With God's abundant mercy, loving kindness, chesed, and great love, and the mitzvah of challah be accepted as though I have given a tithe. And now, as I am fulfilling the mitzvah of challah with all my heart, so may the compassion of the Holy One, blessed be God, arouse to keep me from sorrow and pain always. Amen.
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 And
Thank
as I
you.
said earlier, we have time for one more. This is a time of a sigula. Am Sigula is the chosen people. So this is our chosen time to pray for our loved ones. So traditionally, this time would be we pray for easy childbirth, healthy children, fertility, finding your soulmate, and a refuah shlema, a speedy recovery, that we all have something to recover for. So I'll read this one in Hebrew and English. Mishaberach avotenu v'imotenu, Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, v'Leah, hu yivarech et kol ha-cholim, ba'avur shani et palel ba'avuro, Ram. B'schar zeh HaKadosh Baruch Hu yimaleh rachamim aleihem, l'chalimo, l'raboto, l'chaziko, l'chayoto, tam. V'yishlach lahem meher shlema mina shamayim, l'fruot ha-nefesh, l'fruot ha-guf, l'chol averam, v'gidam, v'toch sh'ar cholei Yisrael, l'fruot ha-nefesh, l'fruot ha-guf, hashta b'gala v'zman kariv, v'nomar, Amen.
Amen.
The original prayer is in the singular. Easier to make it plural in English. May the one who blessed our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bless and heal all those who are in need of healing, especially those who are now suffering from COVID. May the Holy One, blessed be one, overflow with compassion upon all who are ill, to restore them, to heal them, to strengthen them, to enliven them. The one God will send healing to all of them, speedily, a complete healing, healing of the soul and the healing of the body, along with all the ill among the people of Israel and all humankind, soon, speedily, without delay. And let us all say, Amen.
Amen.
So,
Thank you.
thank you.
So I have another plug. Thank you, Eileen Rubin, for reminding me. If we would have had our convention in person, there was a social action project that we were doing to go to the Ark, which you, I'm sure, saw the social justice panel with the then executive director, Mark Swatez, and Rebecca Fletcher. So we are very fortunate that I have received some blankets and bags from sisterhoods throughout Women's League. And yesterday was a tremendous pride to represent Women's League, to deliver the first batch to the Ark. And every time I go in there, I just love the place so much because of what it's doing. And it has really been taxed beyond belief during this pandemic. So they usually have a Hanukkah party in person, which we know is not going to happen. So they are going to figure out a way to deliver the blankets in person to their clientele, so they make sure they have the gift. And if you think of times that aren't so great and you just want to snuggle up in something, and you take your favorite blanket and maybe you'll sit and watch TV or go into bed and makes you feel good. Well, imagine somebody who is homeless or without a job or just generally feeling terrible because what's going on. And to know that somebody spent the time to make this for them, I think is really special. The bags are used in their pantry, which again have been absolutely just flooded with recipients now. But they really believe that we want to help the environment. So if we give them bags that they can reuse, they found that using a bag like that also brings respect to the person. So that's about a 15-minute project. The blanket is about an hour. So if you need any information about those, I'd be happy to help you with that too. And I know there'll be another trip into the city to deliver them. And I'm just very proud of all our women who have helped us out. So thank you.
All right.
Hard to follow that up with a Challah question.
That's okay, Grace.
So the average size of a bread machine, or one that you would recommend, what would you say? Don't get less than holds how many cups of flour?
Well, mine, which I didn't realize this because I only knead and rise in it. I've never baked in a bread machine because it's really hard to get it to do the braids. But it says it's a two, well, I'd like to see that actually. It's a 2-pound loaf that you can bake. So there's plenty of room in the machine for this recipe. Even if it rises, it'll just hit the top. Sometimes it doesn't rise all the way, sometimes it does. But I do have that one recipe that I don't know why, it can't take the rising in there. So I have a Cuisinart, which are, from what I understand, bread machines are really hard to find now. But I like it. I did not get one, I think it was a convection oven. I'm not baking in it, so I don't need that. But I like it because it's a horizontal pail instead of a vertical one. So I think you get a little more space in it.
Can you tell us how you wrap your challah? Both,
Yes.
well, when it's baked and frozen, it's not baked, you know, they want to know.
Okay, I have bread bags that I get from King Arthur Flour, and they're bakery bags, and a loaf will fit in here. When I make something really big, I have a 2-loaf bag, and I just use a clip at the top, get all the air out, use a clip at the top, and stick it in the freezer. And that's the way I thaw it. I don't open it up. I leave it right in the bag.
Okay, and when freezing unbaked, I like to wrap it in wax paper first, just in case it is a little sticky from not being baked, and then put it in a bag like that.
Oh, that's a good idea.
So let's see what we got for you. So right when you take it out of the oven soon, how will you cool it? On a rack or leave it on the baking sheet?
I cool it right on my rack. I take it off immediately and cool it on the rack. The little one's done.
Oh, cute.
Because I knew it couldn't go longer. But I'll leave them, probably tonight I'll put it away. I'll just let them really cool. I've seen what happened when you put warm bread in a plastic bag. It's really not pretty. And it's a shame because you spent all this time.
There are a million thanks to you, Edna. You're amazing. You're inspiring. You've given us an enjoyable day. Everybody,
Well, thank you.
time and your talent.
Thank you so much. See, Grace, little did you know I had this talent when we
No,
were.
I know. We're Facebook friends. We're friends and we're Facebook friends. So I knew.
Yeah.
Okay.
We all come to it from a different place, don't we? But
Well,
it's fun. I really enjoyed this. Thank you. I definitely have to thank Debbie Goldich because she was the one that talked to me originally about this. And thank you, Debbie, for asking me to do it. I've loved this. This has just been so much fun.
So Edna, let me just say that I have spent time in your kitchen in reality.
Yes,
And
you
it
have.
is, and it is the most amazing room. I'm a pretty good cook, and I have to say that you put me to shame, Edna.
Oh,
So
come on.
I thank you so much for sharing your love of being a Jewish woman in the kitchen. And it was just an amazing day to spend it with you. And I hope that we can do this more. And again, thank you.
You're welcome. Well, my timer's almost going off.
It's going off. You want to?
It's almost going off. So we'll
Okay,
see
so we'll
what
save
stage
the rest
it's
of the
in.
thanks till we
Let's
see
see.
the masterpiece.
Let's
But
see.
no
It might
pressure.
not be ready. 30 seconds. This is like the big reveal. I think it's going to need longer. If you don't know to do this, always under time your baking. And periodically, if things start not coming out right, get an oven thermometer and see if your oven is really calibrated right. Oh. Yeah, this is what it looks like so far. It's going to take another 4 minutes. It's not quite there. But that's your end product. It's another reason I like the thermometer. I don't like playing around with really hot bread. Yeah, this isn't. I don't know if you can see, but there's still stuff on the probe, which means it's not cooked inside. And the color isn't right. It's not uniform. So I'm going to put it on for 3 minutes. Okay, well, you got it almost beginning to end.
Thank you very, very much, Edna. This
You're
was
welcome.
incredible. This
Well,
was
thank you.
better
Thank
than
you all for
we
coming.
even thought, you know. We want to thank you. We want to thank Karen Tenisaka, who did the logistics on this. She's incredible. And
She made my recipes look better than they ever did. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Karen. I love you.
Karen was wonderful. Karen makes it go. Rabbi, thank you. She's still on, right?
I'm here.
Yeah, thank you. This was wonderful. You it really informed us. And I don't know about anybody else, but I have to tell you, I'm already now in the holiday mood. And I'm feeling as if it's the beginning of this very, very special time. I know we're in Elul, I get that, but there's something else that's coming, out of today, the spirituality and everything else. And even though I didn't bake any challahs today, I swear I can smell them from Chicago and every
I'm
place else.
sending them to you, Ellen.
Tomorrow, I'll do tomorrow. But anyway, thank you all, the three of you, Debbie, Julia, Grace, Karen, thank you for helping us out. We promise the education people will help the programming people when your turn comes. And everybody, thank you for being part of today. Julia, you want to add anything? She's still
No,
on?
just thank you all for being here. And it was a long day, even though it was broken up. And we just hope you had fun and learned a little bit along the way.
Yes.
And if you
Thank
have
you all again.
suggestions for us, you know, for anything interesting, please feel free to contact one or both of us. We're pretty receptive. So thank you. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Bye. Thank you all.
Tova.